All right. Well, good morning, everyone in the UK. Good afternoon, everyone in China, and good day, everyone in between. Thank you for joining this session this morning on exporting F&B to China, practical tips to make the most of the opportunities. And we're delighted to have Matthew McKenzie, who's the co-founder and executive director of the Export Group Limited, with us this morning. He's based in Shanghai. He's in our office there. I'm here in London. So, lots to talk about. According to a report published by the GAC, the General Administration of Customs, this year, China imported around £45 billion worth of food and drink products, which is a 25% increase on 2016. So, huge opportunities. Food is being imported from European countries, from the US, from New Zealand, Indonesia, Canada, Australia, Brazil, Malaysia, Russia, Vietnam, all sorts of places, and all sorts of food and drink products, depending on, I suppose, specific bilateral relationships, but products like meats and oil, dairy products, seafood, grain products, alcohol, and confectionery products. And like everything, China is full of opportunity, and also it has its very specific and very nuanced issues to deal with for any company looking to enter that market. And that's what we're going to talk about, or principally that's what Matthew is going to talk about today. All right, so just before we get going, for those of you who don't know who we are, the China-Britain Business Council helps British and Chinese businesses and organizations work together in China, the UK, and third markets around the world. With 60 years of experience, experts across the UK and in 15 Chinese locations, and a diverse 1,000-strong membership, we operate alongside the British Chamber of Commerce in China to support companies of all sizes and sectors, from multinationals to SMEs. As the partner of choice for British companies working with China, CBBC delivers a range of events, tailored research, and consultative services. We cooperate closely with the Department for International Trade, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and across government to highlight export opportunities for UK companies and investment opportunities for Chinese organizations. So that's just a little bit of background on who we are. So before we get going, I do hope you ask questions. Please do. Matthew's very happy to answer them. If you want to ask a question, type it in to the box that I'm highlighting here now. And should it be sort of relevant to the flow, I'll ask Matthew immediately. Otherwise, we'll save it to the end and do a Q&A session then. And if we don't get to it, I'll pass it on and he can follow up afterwards. So if I could ask people to click on the raise your hand section here, just the little button that I'm highlighting. This sort of convinces me that I'm not speaking out into a lonely ether. Superb. Okay, I can see plenty of people are raising their hands. I'm going to put all your hands back down again. That's good news. That means everything's working smoothly. We are recording this session, by the way, so if you have a colleague or any other friend, etc., who you think should have watched this or should have listened and might miss it, we'll put it on our website afterwards. All right, so just a little bit of background about our speaker. So Matthew McKenzie, as I said, he's a co-founder and executive director at the Export Group Limited. Matthew has close to 20 years experience working in the export functions of major iconic Australian FMCG businesses, including 5 years at Campbell Arnott's. He has led the growth of Weet-Bix in China from a zero base to now being one of the most successful Australian food brands in the market. Living in Shanghai, he sees the opportunity that is open to Australian FMCG brand owners and UK FMCG brand owners. Spot the guy who copied and pasted and didn't read it, and knows how to build a brand from a small base. So I'm sure, Matthew, you'll be happy to help all our UK as well as Australian friends. I'm going to unmute you and hopefully you are out there. Matthew, over to you.
Yes, good morning, David, and good afternoon from here in Shanghai. And absolutely, my lovely wife is actually from the UK, so love to help UK businesses and brands grow here in China.
Super.
Today, I guess I wanted to talk about a number of practical steps that companies and brand owners can take, I guess, to try to make the most of the opportunity here in China. So I really wanted to talk about some strategies to help with partner selection, turning some into all, and also what to expect when you're on the ground. So I'll touch each of those themes today. If we can go to partner selection, the next slide. Partner selection is probably the most important decision you'll make in your export journey here in China. Who you do business with, how you do business, these things really dictate how your business ultimately will perform in the market. So it's absolutely critical for long-term success. I guess from the years of experience that I've had here on the ground, a lot of people I speak to talk about big state-owned enterprises or huge companies, and from my experience, big is not necessarily best. And the reason for that is, big companies, if you're looking to do a £500,000 in export to the UK, and you're talking to a company here that's turning over billions of pounds, you're almost you're kind of irrelevant to them in a way. You're just rounding. So I think it's always important to find businesses that are aligned with the sector that you're in and understand your brand and what you're trying to do here in China. I'd also be looking for companies that have relevant experience. A lot of companies promise a lot across here, but you really got to look for those companies that have relevant experience in the channels and in the sectors that you are trying to perform in. The other thing is don't be afraid to ask direct questions. A lot of people, not just from the UK, but from all around the world that visit us here, they tell us, oh, we shouldn't be asking certain direct questions. Well, absolutely, the opposite is the case. If a company here is saying, well, hey, you're a confectionery business, and they're saying, oh, we handle these confectionery brands from Europe or from the United States, and we're doing a great job, ask them to speak to the export manager or the owner of those businesses back in those home markets. And if they're not prepared to share that information with you, then you really have to question how solid their businesses and those relationships are. So don't be afraid to ask those direct questions. Also, get out and visit the offices and warehouses of companies that you're looking to do business with. You can tell a lot by the operation and the look of the office. Are there people in the office? Does an office exist? Are they trying to prevent you from going to the office? All these would be telltale signs of perhaps they're not quite what they're promising to be. So make sure you go and visit these people, and don't be afraid to do that. Are companies prepared to work on a performance basis? A lot of companies here will promise the world, and oh yes, I import meat, and I can handle all these things. But you need to give me absolute exclusivity on the market here in China, and just leave it to me, and I'll look after it from here. Well, actually, if they're not prepared to sign up and say, well, okay, we're prepared to commit to £100,000 in business, £1 million in business in year one, in order to renew the contract into year 2 and year 3, for example, then you've really got to question their commitment to making things happen. And I think it's always imperative to have, not just in China, but wherever you do business, is to have, aligned goals and definitely targets that need to be hit and met. The other thing is, don't be pushed into a quick decision. Again, a lot of companies that I've seen over the years have partnered up with the first company that they've met, either in the UK or here in China, because they felt good about it and they felt that they were a good partner, but actually they weren't necessarily a best partner. So make sure you look at a number of options and don't be sort of pushed into a quick decision. The next slide, please, Dave.
Yes. Just, I want to reflect a little on your point about big is not necessarily best. China is, sure. A lot of China is kind of overwhelmed by the big, large companies that we all know, the handful of branded companies or whatever. So if you're a smaller, medium-sized F&B company and you're looking at the China market, how do you find the relevant not big, if you know what I mean? So how do you get to those good, what intermediaries are out there to help you? Obviously, you're a company that would do that, but are there other companies that stand in the middle? Are there, do you go to DIT or CBBC, or what's the best way that you would recommend for companies to make that step to finding the right kind of partner?
Yeah, look, great question. And what I would suggest to companies is, obviously you can speak to people like us, but I'd be speaking to DT, I'd be speaking to CBBC people across here. You guys have got a network of offices across the country. So make connections, make contacts through independent parties. I would also recommend coming to some of the major trade shows here that are relevant to your product and your sector. And not necessarily just sitting on a stand and waiting for people to come to you, but walking around the show and speaking to companies from other countries or from the UK that are currently doing business in China, and I guess get as much intelligence as you can possibly from third parties, from yourself, and from other people that you know and trust. So I would recommend going in the early phase, go as broad as you can in terms of finding informants on the ground, and then take it from there.
Interesting. Thanks very much.
Okay. Positive meetings to orders. Obviously, in China, you know, they're very hospitable people, and you can feel very special and showered with great hospitality when you're here. However, you know, ultimately you're here to do business, so it's always important to turn a conversation into actionable business, or work out whether the company that you're talking to is serious. And I guess, you know, even small, you know, medium-sized companies here, there tends to be a lot of heads around the table, or a lot of people in meetings, etc. But it's really critical to find out, okay, who is the decision maker. If it's a private organisation, it's most likely to be the owner, or someone that's, you know, been a senior manager in that business for a very long time. If it is a government organisation, then there's a very hierarchical structure, and it's very important though to get to the decision maker. Who is going to sign off on the orders? Who's going to sign off on whether we do business? So very important to find that out. Also, and then once you've found out who that decision maker is, you know, what do they need to take the conversation to transaction? So obviously, you know, you need to negotiate price. You need, what sort of documentation will they require? You know, do you need to provide them with a letter of authority? Do you need to provide them with an exclusivity clause in the contract? There's a raft of things that you need to prepare, but really you need to be driving the conversation to those, I guess, those roadblocks that you're going to hit before you can actually start transacting. So I would be introducing, once you've worked out, okay, we want to do business with this company, you know, you really need to start taking the conversation to those, to clear those roadblocks before they become roadblocks and frustrations for you. The other thing is, have multiple options if you can with partners. You know, one thing that China is blessed with is a whole lot of people, and I guess that's why do business here, because the consumer base is huge. Just because it's such a large economy, there are a raft of companies here that so always have a fallback option. If a Chinese company realizes that you're their only option, they're going to negotiate a lot harder. So don't tell the company who your options are, but definitely let them know that, okay, well, if we can't strike a deal on these terms, then, you know, unfortunately I'm going to have to work with another party. You know, frame it in that way, but definitely have other options if you can. The other thing that I have noticed is, you know, people and companies quite often sort of skip around the price negotiation. You know, they sort of think, oh, we need to build a relationship first, and we need to go through contracts first. And once we've agreed on that, then we can get down to pricing. And I guess generally in Western companies, you know, when you're on the flight home, you need to prepare a presentation for your senior management or for the management team back at home. Chinese companies are aware of this, and they're very good at negotiating price and some of those, I guess, tricky terms on the last day of a trip, where they know that the British counterpart needs to make a decision. They need to go home with something. So I've seen this a number of times. So what I would say is as early as you can in your trip when you're across here, or, you know, get down to some of these nitty-gritty points in terms of pricing, because you don't want to end up that, oh gosh, the taxi's waiting and I have to go to the airport and I need to go home with a deal. You know, that you don't put yourself under that pressure. So these are the sorts of strategies that we employ, I guess, to turn positive meetings, you know, into orders and get towards transaction as soon as we can. Okay, what to prepare? So Chinese companies tend to like as much information as possible about who they may be working with. So be prepared for more questions than you would typically expect in the UK. You know, Chinese people are extremely detailed and are extremely used to getting a lot of information about things. So, I mean, obviously, a stock standard company presentation with your history, the position that you have in your domestic market, some international success stories. You know, really frame your business, frame your brand, frame your product up well for your partners across your potential partners. Then talking, you know, detailed information about your products and your unique selling proposition. So what makes your brand special? Why are you different from other products? And one of the things that I find myself speaking to a lot of foreign companies about when they come to China is that China doesn't necessarily need us. China has pretty much everything here. So what makes your product special? Why would a Chinese consumer be prepared to pay a premium for your price? What's unique about it? Why does it? Because that's really the secret sauce, the magic that you need to put into your messaging to the consumer. So really your first sell is to your partners here on the ground. So have a pretty clear story there. I would also recommend trying to understand any basic regulatory hurdles that you may face. Now, obviously, there's a lot of red tape in China. There's a lot of challenge with things such as packaging, import regulations, non-tariff barriers, etc. I would recommend speaking to some of those counterparts that I mentioned previously. The DTI guys, the CBBC people, and companies like our independent third-party companies like ours, to try to get a handle on some of the basic regulatory hurdles that you may face. Have your packaging possibly reviewed before you come here, because the last thing you want to be doing is negotiating with a company across here, and they actually know that your Achilles heel is that you're going to have some regulatory hurdles. So, you really want to be ready to talk talk business with them. Try to cover off some of those before you come. I would also, with the advent of e-commerce across here, and as we all know, e-commerce is huge. It's now the biggest e-commerce market in the world. A lot of brands don't realize that before they get here, through informal networks, their products are already selling in China on platforms such as Taobao, where people in the UK buy mixed products, they send it across to China and they sell it on stores. So I can guarantee you that if you're going into a meeting with a Chinese counterpart, they will have done their research on whether your product is selling online. They'll look at the pricing, they'll look at the information that's there. And you may not be aware of this, but it's quite possible that your product is already selling, and it may be selling well, and you might have some really positive consumer feedback on the feedback lines there. So what I would recommend is do a little bit of research there, find out if your product is selling, because that can actually help your negotiations immensely. Product samples. Chinese people, from my experience across here, they love to touch the product, taste the product, feel the product. It's okay to have it on a presentation, but it's a million times better to actually have the product physically with you, to really have and it helps you then to talk through the USPs and talk about your product and your brand. So make sure you bring samples with you. And just on samples, sometimes it can get a little bit tricky when you're sending things across here by courier. They quite often do get caught in customs. So I would always recommend bringing something in your luggage with you if it's practical and you can do that. And the last thing is WeChat rules the world across here in China. Things such as WhatsApp, Facebook, very challenging to use, if not impossible at times. So everybody here communicates on WeChat. So what I would strongly recommend is download the WeChat app before you come across here, set up an account, and then it'll be very easy for you to communicate with people. And if you're using a Gmail server, you've got certain things which are, have a Google backend, you might also want to download a VPN before you come here, which will allow you to use those services. So, for communication purposes, I'd probably look at those before you come across to China. Thanks, David. Okay, what to expect? Well, China is it's a very intense place to spend time, and there's a major contrast across this vast country between different cities and regions. And really, if you look at the size and scale and diversity of China, it's almost like Europe, the European Union under one flag. It's an amazingly diverse country. So, if you come to Shanghai, it's very cosmopolitan. You go to down south into Guangzhou, just north of Hong Kong, subtropical and very strong trading ports. You go out west, it's the west as we call it, and up north, it's pretty harsh region. So the things to remember across pretty much all of China is, though, that business is done 24/7. When you're talking to business people here, they're switched on, and particularly with WeChat now, your office and your business never closes almost. So people expect quick responses. They expect you to be available. So when you're on the ground here, be prepared you know, early starts, late finishes, etc. Another thing I just wanted to point out: China is extremely safe and extremely friendly. There's a lot of, you know, China, I think, traditionally had a bit of a reputation for not necessarily being the friendliest or safest place, but I can absolutely tell you that I've lived in Shanghai for four and a half years and never had a problem in any part of this country. It's extremely safe. So, you know, if I dropped, you know, $100 on the street, someone would tap me on the shoulder and give it back to me. I've got no doubt. It's the safest place I've ever been. And I've lived in Japan, which is extremely safe as well. I actually find it just as safe here. Credit cards may not work. So if you're going to a restaurant, even in the big cities, you know, definitely ask before you order. Here, cash and WeChat and Alipay are really the modes of payment. So just to avoid, I guess, avoid embarrassment really more than anything, just check before you order whether international credit cards are accepted. So yeah, so just double check on that. The larger first and second tier cities in China are extremely progressive, very cosmopolitan. You know, the city here in Shanghai, I think we have a population of somewhere around 23 million. You've got everything you could imagine in a city, city like London. We've got everything here. So, and the people are also very progressive, particularly in the biggest cities. A lot of people have been educated abroad. People are interested in foreign products, are interested in foreign business. China is open for business, so expect the people to be very progressive. If you go out to the lower tier cities, obviously you'll find a lot less English is spoken, and it will be more challenging to get around. The people are just as hospitable, and it's very, very safe. They're not as used to doing business in the street, particularly the children. It's quite interesting, some of the wonderful places I get to travel to with my work. You know, you may be pointed at, it's quite cute for little kids. Just be prepared. It's a little bit hard to travel with you, or and just to that, just one other point I would say is, if you do negotiations across here, the translator from your Chinese counterpart, because if you do that, then basically the translator is going to work on behalf of whoever is paying them, which makes sense. So yeah, make sure that you're paying their fee, so they're working for you. Yeah, so that's pretty much.
Yeah, question from my side. You know, you're talking a lot about the practicalities of what to expect when you get there. When are the key times if a company is looking to explore the China market? So, you know, there's a couple of big, huge trade fairs that are well known. Maybe you can talk about them, and also you know, other times throughout the year where it would be a good, recommended or a time to go and explore the market for this type of F&B product. Hello, have we lost you?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. For food and beverage, obviously
All right, the joys of the Chinese internet connection. Are you still there, Matthew, with us? How are you doing over there? I think we've lost him. We'll just give it another minute or two, see if it sort of comes back in again. Apologies.
David?
Yes. Can we hear you?
David, can you hear me? Yes, I've got you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're in and out. That's just, look, it's China internet. So yeah, maybe we didn't. Well, I didn't hear. Sure. I didn't hear your answer in terms of, you know, suitable times or most recommended times to go to China if you're exploring this sector.
Sure. So there are three major trade shows that I would recommend companies consider. The first of those is Xiao China, which is here in Shanghai, and that's in May. We've got Food and Hotel China, which is in mid-November every year. That's also very good. Behemoth of a trade show is called the CII Airwaves here at the moment. CII is the China International Import Expo, and that covers all sectors. It's claiming to be the largest trade show in the world, and that will be, the first one is actually taking place here in Shanghai in the first week of November, and it will be opened by, you know, it's a huge event. Would also avoid hot across most of China, sort of July, August, and it's extremely cold in northern China in the winter, so sort of your December, January. But really, that sort of leads into Chinese New Year. So those would be the times I'd be considering.
All right, super. Moving on.
Sure. Okay. The export group in a nutshell, I've got a couple of basic slides on our business. So we're a partner on the ground here in China for companies from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, and the UK. We're based in China and partners, channels, execute marketing strategies, all whilst generating real sales for brands. And we've had 20 years experience doing that. So, we're sort of your extension on the ground here in China. Next slide, David.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess just a very quick brief on our I guess modus operandi. We help companies to do a market assessment. So what's the opportunity for their product in the market here? We then go through strategic planning with them, then move on to omni-channel distribution for those channels that are suitable for the brand. We then can activate and brand build, review and refine the strategy and look at the results of what's working, what's not working, and then an ongoing management. So it's almost a circular process and a continuum for brands on the ground here in China. I'll just talk quickly on the next slide to some of our success, and this is a great UK brand, actually, PZ Cussons owned Morning Fresh, which is Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. So what did we do? Well, it became the #1 dishwashing liquid with the largest cross-border e-commerce platform in China. So how did we do that? Well, we arranged. We're very Chinese in how we behave with Cola, the e-commerce platform. We did a big strategic signing ceremony. In fact, the pictures that you can see on the right of screen, it's actually the CEO of Cola. She's quite a famous business lady here in China. And so we got her to participate in a live broadcast. But what we did on that live broadcast to really motivate Cola to support the program was we did a world first launch on their platform. So before the UK, before Australia, before New Zealand, we launched a 2-in-1 product. So we got massive airtime and did a 45-minute live broadcast where we had 250,000 consumers. We put a little bit of theatre around. We had the CEO actually signed a few bottles, and we put those for mystery buyers. We had win trips down to Australia. We did sort of a huge got a huge traction out of that, and really built and cemented what was already a solid base in the market, and really drove it up to #1. Some of the brands on the next slide that we work with and manage, some you may recognize, some possibly not. So obviously in the food and beverage space, we work with Rafferty's Garden, which is a market-leading baby food brand. Arnott's Biscuits, which is part of the Campbell's Soup Global Empire. Post Holdings, third largest cereal manufacturer and actually parent company to Weetabix. We work with one of their US divisions. Slim Secrets, IXL Jams, Elders, who are a large livestock business out of Australia. Golden Valley, which is a Coca-Cola owned fruit brand. So we work with a wide range of brands with our team here on the ground. And just on the next slide, if anyone wishes to get in touch, then obviously you can take a look at our website. And any of you that are on WeChat, please feel free to scan my QR code, and that will take you directly to my WeChat account, and feel free to follow me. I'm always putting, different events that we're doing here on the ground in China. We're always posting pictures on either LinkedIn or on WeChat, so feel free to reach out. My email address is there, and also my phone number. So yeah, feel free to take advantage of that and be in touch.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. And if people want to ask a question, please do type it in. Just one question again from my own side. Is the thirst for international products, increasing? There's a lot of talk in China about sort of domestic growth and domestic champions and domestic competitors. So, is there still that buzz? Is there still that sort of veneer and polish about international products?
Oh, look, absolutely. I think, I think the biggest change that I've seen is some of the Chinese local producers have really, smartened their act up in terms of their marketing and their quality of product. So China is becoming a more challenging place to do business purely because domestic competition is increasing. However, for the middle class and the upper class that can afford international products and brands, they definitely want to. There is a definite preference particularly for food and beverage. To be buying from overseas, just the implicit trust and the expectation of a higher standard is definitely here. And if it wasn't here, I wouldn't have. I tell people I'm absolutely committed. I bought a one-way ticket to China because it's an ongoing macro trend.
Sure. And are those local competitors? Are they making good quality local domestic products, or are they trying to sort of mimic international products? Have they moved into that space? Is there still a real difference between Chinese food and imported food?
Look, it really depends on the subsector and the particular brand. I mean, some of the companies here are mimicking global brands, and some of them are doing a half decent job at it. In other sectors, it's not going so well. So if I look at one of the areas where I think that some of the big companies here have been quite successful and are doing quite a good job is in the dairy space. Particularly in drinking yogurt, there's prebiotics and probiotics. There's a lot of product development, a lot of solid branding, a lot of both online, offline support, a lot of pretty smart, slick advertising. All those things have started to appear here in the last 2 or 3 years. Whereas in other areas, just trying to think, like if you look at probably more the fresh food side of things, the quality here is definitely not as high as it is from overseas. Now, that's not to say in dairy there's no opportunities. There are absolutely opportunities, and people here are looking for brand stories. They're looking for the quality from overseas. They're looking for brands that have got history and something unique. But it's just becoming a little bit more competitive than it was, say, 4 or 5 years ago.
All right, interesting. I've got a question here from Pete, and he asks that I've heard it's good etiquette to take a gift for a boss or owner if you're visiting potential customers. What size value of gift is appropriate, and is there anything in particular that you would recommend?
Look, that's an interesting question, Pete, and it really depends on, I guess, on you more than anything. What I would recommend is I'd definitely be bringing something that's English. So you want to be representing your country. A bottle of, whether it's a bottle of wine, whether it's something that people can put on their desk at the office and it becomes a little bit of a talking piece. I definitely wouldn't go over the top. I wouldn't be spending a huge amount of money, but something that can be a nice reminder of your journey across to meet with people is definitely welcomed.
All right, thanks. I've got a question here from Susan, and Susan asks, for Chinese labeling on packaging, does this need to be done before the product goes to Chinese customs, or can it be done on the ground in China?
Sure. Okay, Susan, for Chinese labeling, generally what happens is product is labeled across here before it goes out. So what happens is product comes across to China. It then gets labelled, and then it's checked by the authorities and then released for sale. So that's typically what happens. It's a little bit different in cross-border e-commerce. And I don't want to get too technical and confuse people, but if it's going into cross-border, the product will then go into a free trade zone or into Hong Kong where there's no labelling requirement, and it'll be sold as such. It'll be sold without label. But if you're coming into general trade in China, it will be labelled across here.
All right, super. All right, well, I think we're sort of coming to the end of our session today. If I could just maybe, if you could, Matthew, give me your sort of, the three sort of in the 3 sentences that you would say to any company in this sector that's approaching the Chinese market. What would be those 3 things that you would say?
Look, the first thing is China's not an easy market, but it's definitely a market worth spending time on because this market is a scalable market, and if you get it right, it can change your business forever. So it's worth spending the time, it's worth understanding, it's worth getting involved in. The second thing I would say is that it's not a sprint. This market is a marathon. So you need to be prepared for a long and potentially winding journey. Things change here very rapidly, but going through some of the processes and steps that I spoke about today, should put you in pretty good stead. And I guess the third thing is there is a demand here for high quality food and beverage products, but I guess resting on the fact that it's clean and green and from the UK is not enough anymore. You really need to be focusing on what's unique about your product. Why is there a premium for your product, and you need to justify that. So really think about your brand story, your product story, and that unique selling proposition that you're going to give to the Chinese consumer. Interesting.
But just before we go, I do want to pick up on that, actually. It's an interesting point. So, sure. I mean, every product and every brand has its own identity, strategy, story, as you said. And we see companies across the spectrum doing all sorts of different things. But how should a company go about thinking about whether they should localize their product or whether they should emphasize the difference as the USP? Do you see where I'm going with that?
Sure. Look, my recommendation, particularly for brands that are starting their journey here in China, is really focus on your story in the UK, and don't over-localize your product too early. I think as brands go through an evolution and start to scale up, what you can then do is start to, I guess, almost create like a hybrid message in terms of, you take some of the UK side of things and marry it up with some of the, nuances here in China. And, if you think about brands, Häagen-Dazs is probably a very good example. So 20 odd years ago when Häagen-Dazs first started selling here in China, they basically put product in containers and sold at a very high price, and pretty much what was sold overseas was sold here. Now Häagen-Dazs has got to the point where they're, tens of millions of pounds turnover in revenue. So recently when we had mooncakes and for the Mid-Autumn Festival, Häagen-Dazs had tents all over Shanghai and other major cities in China where they actually had created these ice cream mooncakes. So they've very much localized their branding, localized their product. They've adapted to the local culture. But really, the first phase of their business development, if they had have gone too local, then it almost confuses consumers. But once the brand is recognized, once people understand it, then it's the time to start localizing a little bit, in my opinion.
All right, fascinating. I think, I think that's a really interesting and important message. Oh, hang on, we might just have one more little hand jumped up. Let me have a look at this question. Excuse me.
Sure.
Oh, it's just somebody asking for your details. That's fine. All right, we'll deal with that. All right, cool. Well, thank you for that. Let me just draw our listeners' attention today to a few bits and pieces at CBBC. You can see our agriculture, food and drink. That is our landing page, which will have all sorts of information, our contact details for Antonetta, our colleague here in the UK, who will happily help and support and give you some advice on different bits and pieces. I would also recommend having a look at our food and beverage insights. I think you should be able to click on these, by the way. You should be able to click on these images, and it should bring you there immediately. There's some interesting insights that we've done on cereals, breakfast cereals, snacks, and I want to say beverages like fizzy drinks, that type of thing, which I hope will be helpful to you guys as well. And then a couple of upcoming events. Our SME China Forum is on the 31st of October, so it's this day next week. It's around the Heathrow area, so somewhere that's connected, I guess, to all of the south of the UK. It's the 6th time we've done it. If you're in China, if you're in Shanghai during CIIE, a big event that Matthew raised, we'll be hosting our 6th CBBC China Outbound Conference on the 8th of November. I'm going to give you one more question. Are you still there, Matthew? I've just had a quick question.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, David, just on the CIIE, we actually have a major stand there where a number of our clients will be attending. I'll be at the show. So if anyone's coming across for that, I'm happy to send the details of where we will be and come and say hi.
Yeah, super. All right. Well, Rob is asking, where is the best place to get retail data? I thought that was a good question to hang on you there at the end.
Right. Well, it really depends on the channel that you're looking for. So e-commerce, if we look at retail on e-commerce, generally that's a little bit easier.
Hot Alibaba, specifically asking hot beverages, he's just said.
Hot beverages, okay. Look, there are a number of ways to do that. It can be quite expensive to get that data here. I wouldn't on this forum want to recommend any particular service, but I'm quite happy to take that offline with Rob and point him in the right direction if that would help.
Okay, so you're saying that it's probably something that will need some not primary, but certainly secondary research. That there isn't maybe open source places to go that will give you great data like this. You might have to dig a little deeper and throw some money at it.
Yeah, you for that sort of thing, yeah, you're going to need to dig a little bit deeper, I would think.
All right, brilliant. Well, Rob, you will receive Matthew's contact details within the next 24 hours. Okay, well, listen, we're going to wrap it up for today. Thank you very much for everybody for attending. Thank you very much for Matthew for your expertise and your clear enthusiasm on the opportunities in the China market. You fit in well here in CBBC. We all feel the same way. But of course, there are challenges and there are things that you need to take account of as you enter the market. So as I said, you'll receive an email in the next 24 hours just with follow-up with a link to this and details and bits and bobs. So other than that, all I can say is have a great day and wish you all happy China business. Have a great day. Bye.